Let us continue with our lesson, and before we can go and test it our application, we have to refactor some code over here. Because if you notice that when we are sending the delete request to our API, we are passing the ID over here, but this ID is the local ID that we currently have. This is the local DB ID, but we need to pass the task ID. So this task ID will match our remote DB ID. So this is the remote DB ID that we have stored locally in our app DB. So this is the task ID. So let's copy this one and pass it over here. So the task ID is the one that we have to pass over here. And the next is the, if you take a look at the task DAO, we are using a annotation of add delete. So whenever we make use of annotation of add delete, we are passing a task entity over here. And when we are passing this task entity, we should pass the ID of this particular task entity. Based on that particular task ID, it will be deleted from our DB. So not just the task ID, we also need to pass the local DB ID. So the local DB ID is the must that we have to pass over here, and if we doesn't pass that particular ID over here, it will be not able to delete and that particular task. Based on the ID that we have, we need to pass over here. It's a similar that we have done with the edit task, that we are passing over here the ID. So we have to do the same thing over there. So let's go back to the task detail view model, and over here I need to pass the ID which is of long, and that I need to pass the ID over here. Where is the ID? Okay, so I think it got conflict with the local ID that we have currently over here within this context. So let me change this one ID to ID of the local DB or something, or I can just say ID FIELD field. So we have an ID field. I'll just make use of this one over here, ID field dot value, and okay, that should be fine, and it should be of not null. And why it is that one? Okay, so I need to pass it as a long. So long is equal dot to long, and I will just pass it over here to not null. Okay, and I think that should be fine. And since we have changed the ID name over here, which is ID field, we have to also change it in our task detail fragment. We have make use over here of the task field. So that should be the one that we have to pass it over here. And also where we, okay, so we have make use in the multiple place. Just copy and replace that one. Okay, and that should be done, right? So I think that should be okay with it. And let us implement the button click over here. So over here, fb delete. So we have fb delete dot set on click listener. So let us implement the on click listener. And when we click on that one, I will say a view model dot, and that should be say a delete task, and that should call this particular function. So delete task over here. So what we will do now is let me try to put a breakpoint over here, and over here too, as well as here. So let us run our application in a debug mode. So let me run in the debug mode. Okay, so our application is up, and let us try to delete. Let us try to delete the first one, test title one. We go over here, and we have this delete button, and I will just click on delete, and it went over here. That's fine. And if you say the task ID dot value, so let me check the value that what we have. It's a 1. And if we go back to my php-admin, that should be the one, the ID. So ID 1, it has test title 1, test both tasks 1, right? So that should be the one we are deleting. I think that's the correct. So that's the correct ID that we have sent. And let me go back over here, and let's hit the, okay, let me come and put a breakpoint, and let's see what we get from the response. Okay, we get a response is a 404 not found, which means that our route was not found, and that is the main thing. I think that error task does not belong to you. So why it says that task does not belong to you? Okay, let me say the task does not belong to you. That means we have missed out something. So let me go to my project over here, and that should be over here. So in the destroy call, when the destroy calling, and we are checking if nuts empty the task, that's the error is returning from here. So error, the task does not belong to you, which means that the user, okay, so we have to pass the user ID. So the user ID was not passed, that's why we are not able to delete that one. So we have to pass another parameter, the request body, we have to pass the user ID. So let's go this one and create this one in our application. Let me go back to the application over here, and let me stop this one first. And in the, let me go to the remote and go to the request, and in the to do we have the delete request. So in the delete request I need to pass this particular val of the user ID, right? And this should be of the string, let us say of the string, and I will just copy the serialize over here and just paste it, and I will say that this is of the user ID. Okay, now so we have set up this one, and now when we send this particular task delete task request, we have to pass the user ID. So the user ID over here is this one, right? So user ID, just copy and paste it over here, and okay, so that the user ID we have passed, and also we need to set that one in our repository. So let's go to the repository over here, and in the repository delete task repository I have passed it over here. Okay, that should look fine, and let's try to debug again. Okay, let's try to put a run as a debug, and let's see, and the application is running. Let's go to the down at the first one. Let us try to delete this particular task. Click on delete, and let's see what we are getting. So we are getting the, okay, so that means it was successfully deleted. We go to the phpMyAdmin and refresh this one, then you should see the ID one was deleted. Now it's the second ID. Okay, that's fine. And if you can go over here, and we will see, we will call this particular task, and let me go at the end. So you can see it was successfully deleted locally also, which means that we get one row was affected. And let's run it, and let's open our application, and after the delete was successful, we are not doing anything because we need to go back to the particular task over here. So that should remove the particular task from our local DB. So the next step is to implement that one. We also have to implement like whenever we click on this particular button, it should ask a user for the confirmation to delete, not just go and delete, because that's a really bad practice. So if you click on the delete button, then it's go to your remote server and delete the data. So we need to place a confirmation button, so ask the user whether they are sure to delete this particular task. So let's do it in our next lecture, and we still have some more things to do up and fix it. So let's meet in the next lecture. Till then, have a great day.